When I wrote a piece on this 3 years ago, it was only 3% of households in Mexico that had any sort of financial instrument at all, it means stocks, bonds, crypto, any form of financial instrument. You compare that to the US, where more than 50% of households have direct stock ownership. This country has been dominated for too long by crypto casinos, and it's time that investors are offered an alternative that not only provides them a technological platform where they can buy and sell and do other things, but also provides actually education and assistance for that process.
Hi everyone and welcome back to Stephan Livera podcast. Joining me on the show today is Gustavo Flores. He is the CEO and founder of Aureo, which is a Bitcoin startup or Bitcoin company in Mexico. We're going to get into a bunch of things. Now, Gustavo, I know you've had a bit of a history in various different aspects of Bitcoin. So just for listeners, well, first off, welcome to the show. And do you want to just start with giving us a bit of an overview of your history in Bitcoin?
Certainly. Well, first of all, thank you, Stefan, for having me. It's an honor to be here. I've been a fan of the show for so long, I cannot even remember. And my story started in when I was 20 years old, back in Canada, where I grew up, in Montreal, Canada. I started being part of the Bitcoin Montreal community, which was one of the earliest Bitcoin communities in the world. That we had a physical space in Montreal since 2013, and just regular meetups and big crowds. And I started with just investing, mining project that I had, nothing really serious. It took a pivot in 2019 when I became a Bitcoin maxi after reading Mastering Bitcoin, after learning the technicals, understanding the difference between crypto and Bitcoin, and launching my first startup, Verify. Verify was at first a research and consulting firm where we would help customers do self custody, but it became a platform where you could buy and sell Bitcoin in 2021. And then we got acqui-hired by Bull Bitcoin, where I worked along me and my teammates. We all transitioned to there. I worked there for about a year until 2022. After that, I wanted to dig in deeper into more technical stuff and like privacy related. So I went to work at Wasabi Wallet. I was a technical writer at Wasabi for about a year until it shut down last year. And I've been working at Bitcoin Optech as a contributor. I write the summaries on the pull requests of the code bases, and I've been doing that for the past year. And I now launch, and now a year already, I've launched Swapito, which has now rebranded to Aureo, and I think we'll get more into the details of that. So in resume, in conclusion, I've been working at multiple Bitcoin startups through different roles, mostly related to product and marketing, but I'm also quite technical, so I kind of bring the bridge between both the technical and non-technical parts of the companies.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's so many aspects in that. It's sort of like where do we even start, right? But yeah, as you said, it's like a long journey of like focusing on kind of research aspects or self custody, education aspects of it, and then kind of in the privacy world of it with CoinJoin and Wasabi stuff. And then yeah, I'm curious. I mean, from your work on Optech, right? Which for listeners, I do recommend go and check it out. I can't listen to every episode myself, but I try to because there's a lot of good info and it helps me stay up to date on like technical things myself, right? Even though I am also trying to help people stay up to date on some technical things. I think that's probably an interesting point to start on. Like this may be a bit of a divide and not just kind of knots and core stuff, but just generally that there's kind of I'm going to say branching of different communities in Bitcoin per se. Do you want to comment on that in terms of the technical world of Bitcoin?
Yeah, certainly. So, I mean, I would say the first thing is that the more you learn about Bitcoin, the more you understand, the least you understand about Bitcoin, right? The more it becomes clear that there's more to learn. So, this is a whole rabbit hole, right? And to most people I talk to about what we write in Bitcoin Optech, they're very it's many like layers in depth of understanding, right? Like for example, I cover like press re, like pull requests related to changes in Bitcoin Core, but to understand like let's say related to Stratum V2, but to understand that you would have to understand what's the problem with mining decentralization today and why Stratum V2 is a solution to that. To then understand the technicals of how Stratum V2 works. So I would say it's not, it's, I would recommend everyone to do it, but also to just try to understand like a topic in detail, right? Like, okay, I don't have to understand the whole newsletter. I'll just start with this one on Stratum V2 to this week, this month. I'll understand how mining works, why this brings mining decentralization. So at Bitcoin Optic, we try to stay as like logical as possible, and not try to make it distinct from the Twitter discourse, which is very opinionated. We have commented on the many issues many debates that have happened lately, but you would it's it, we really don't want it to consume our time, right? We really want to focus on the technicals behind Bitcoin, the news, the changing consensus. So that's what we've been doing, and we haven't really taken a side. So most people I talk to about this, are very open. It's different in person than online as well. In person, I also present the Mexico City Bit Devs, and when I talk about this, everybody's very open. But of course, Bitcoin Optech, it's funded by Brink. Brink funds Bitcoin Core developers. If you don't like Bitcoin Core developers, it will naturally, you might not like the Bitcoin Optech crowd either, right? But I, but
Yeah,
that's the
yeah.
way.
And I mean, yeah, to be clear, I wasn't saying like give us your stance on Knots versus Core kind of stuff. I just meant kind of broadly that there's a bit of a disconnect, right? And I think maybe what I'm sort of getting at more is like this whole, some people see it as like derogatory or whatever, but it's like a funny term, pleb slop, right? Like it's kind of like this idea that there's a whole bunch of people who like they're kind of following certain kinds of NGU or kind of engagement content, but without sort of taking the time to go and learn some technical aspects of Bitcoin. And I think that's maybe sort of what I was getting at there. I'm curious if you have any comment on that. Is that something you've seen?
It's definitely something I've seen a lot. And I think that kind of culture shift happened around the time of 2020, 2021. I remember in Twitter, we used to have more technical discussions back then. Maybe I think the Twitter algorithm also had a interference in that culture shift, right? So, but it's natural. As Bitcoin grows, it's just normal that not everybody's going to be as technical. But I do recommend people to learn about it. We have a great section that's called topics where you can like learn about a topic, like unrelated to the newsletter aspect. You can just learn about Bitcoin topics. I also recommend people to read Mastering Bitcoin. That has been one of the most profound books that has transformed my understanding of Bitcoin, right? But it's okay too. It's normal that people don't have the technical understanding of everything. It was just bound to happen as Bitcoin grew. But it is something that we advise at all to all people. However, we understand not everyone will be able to make it, and that's fine too.
Yeah. And yeah, to be fair, not everyone is sort of full-time working in Bitcoin like you and I are. So, if they have some fiat mining job and they're just kind of loosely following, there is an element of like, okay, yeah, it is difficult to kind of have the time to go and read all these things because, we've got families, kids, and whatever else is going on in people's lives. It's not that easy, but it just is a different. I would just say it's shifted some of the conversations and it's kind of created a bit of a funny phenomenon of like people being very. I think maybe the phenomenon I'm noticing is people are very overconfident about things without sort of actually understanding what's going on under the hood, right? Because they've heard one particular person's take on something and they just kind of repeat that without sort of considering the different views. And I think that's, I don't know. To me, it's a bit annoying in some ways because it kind of degrades the online conversations that we end up having.
I totally understand, and I feel the same way. I think we should also explore other forums. Twitter is not the only Bitcoin forum there is. If people want to have more advanced conversations, I mean, Delving Bitcoin, a big source from where we get our content.
Right, mailing
Mailing
lists, Delving
lists,
Bitcoin, and
IRC,
various
various
places.
places, but definitely something that is annoying. It kind of became political in some ways. It took a political turn, the whole Bitcoin culture. But I don't, I think it was always bound to happen.
So let's talk a little bit about because obviously you're in Mexico. You've been there for a couple of years, right? Tell us a little bit about what you saw. Well, first off, why moving to Mexico and why building in Mexico?
Totally. So I'm Peruvian. I was born there. I lived 8 years of my life there, but I lived 17 years of my life in Montreal, Canada, and so most of my life experience is in Canada. And I moved to Mexico during COVID. Mexico was one of the most open countries in the world where you would have almost and no entry requirements. Um, I don't know why they did it. You know, were they libertarians at heart? I think it was more like a tourist strategy. But I mean, I came here and I fell in love with the country. The culture of Mexico is something that I deeply like. But I also noticed that there was just we were just in a different timeline here regarding to Bitcoin, let's say compared to Canada or the United States. In Canada, I did my startup in 2021. That's when we transitioned to Bull Bitcoin. But it was also around the time where regulations changed. If you wanted to launch a platform for people to buy Bitcoin, you would have to pay at least a couple hundred thousands of dollars in legal costs. In Mexico, we're talking way less than that, closer even less than 10 grand to have legal authorization to operate a Bitcoin platform where people can buy and sell Bitcoin. So that was also the opportunity, right? Just legal costs. This is a less developed market. There's less competitors. The Bitcoin only narrative didn't exist when I came here. Now we're part of it, and other companies are too. So I just saw this opportunity to not only personally enjoy more freedom during a time of such government control across the world, but also to just try to develop Bitcoin in a new market. So that's what I've been doing. It's definitely been a ride and a big deep curve of understanding how culture and how people are different from in Canada and the United States. The core lesson I got is that the strategies I pushed in Canada to, let's say, acquire customers to buy Bitcoin from our platform, or for other companies I worked at, those strategies didn't work here. Culture is very different, you know. So well, I'm sure we'll get into that into more.
So I'm curious. Let's talk about that. So, what are some of the cultural differences you notice in Mexico?
So the first thing I would tell you is that like libertarianism as a culture doesn't exist outside of the first world in my experience, or at least in Mexico, it basically doesn't exist. Maybe less than 1% of the population would consider themselves libertarians. You know, first of all, this country has a big left-wing history and like big left-wing institutions, so that has a big impact. But also sometimes I wonder whether libertarianism is at heart an American or an English speaking culture thing, you know. So that's the main difference. And so I try to get that's because that's how you would get people to jump on Bitcoin in Canada, for example, right? In the US, it's like it's often you those people will get it because they're closer in that sense, right? So that has been I would say a core thing. Also just the online presence, you know, people are not so tribal about online activities as they are in Canada and US. You know, it's like they you I haven't seen any Bitcoin or crypto or company to develop a following or revenue through like a online community that relates also to political values. You know how it's like, oh, we're Bitcoin only libertarian company or like freedom fighting company. Doesn't seem to really work here. People don't seem to care about that more than that. So yeah, let's definitely and also, for example, if you also the biggest difference is how Mexico is a third world country, and it kind of follows a non-official caste system, you know, where most people are
Hmm.
like just poor, and some people are middle class, and very little are upper class, and they all have their distinct way of working and their separate cultures, you know. So it's a social class culture system where you would people behave in different ways depending on where they're at in the social scale, right? So and that's very different from how it works in Canada, where everybody's like middle class and doesn't distinct themselves through these classes or these behaviors.
Interesting. So, you would say parts of the Western world almost have a more quote unquote egalitarian mindset in kind of the way they view themselves, even if you look, yeah, in practice there is still kind of a richer upper class and a poorer lower class and so on, but they at least present an attitude of egalitarianism. Whereas I guess you're saying in Mexico it's kind of a little there's not as much of an explicitly egalitarian sentiment. Let's say people just kind of sort of openly accept different classes. Let's say.
100%, like obviously the government will never admit to that and will always try to pretend that Mexico's becoming first world and
Right.
but 100%, like, and that's probably something that shocks you if you're not used to it. I grew up in Peru, so I kind of had that experience as a kid, or at least my parents told me about it. But it can definitely shock you, and then you can understand. Okay, actually, let's say if I have a product or if I want to talk to people about Bitcoin, it's extremely different how I would relate it to people, even per social class, but also per region. Mexico is an extremely regional country where you have even ethnically, it's extremely diverse. So an extremely distributed form of society where people are very different depending where you go, even from a neighborhood to another, right? So I think that is a core lesson. And to if you want to understand how to like bring Bitcoin here, I think that's you should start by understanding that.
Yeah, and just looking up some basic stats as well. So GDP per capita of Mexico is about $13,000. So it's off the top of my head, I think that's like, let's say, twice as rich as El Salvador ish, in that range. And just a quick stat: looks like 52% of Mexican adults have some form of savings, but among those, it might be more like one biweekly check. Only 10% have savings more than 3 months of expenses. So that's kind of, I guess that's what you're working with, right? When you're trying to obviously get people to adopt Bitcoin, at least on the SOV, store of value side of things. So can you talk to us a little bit on that side of things? I guess I presume then, because you're doing a Mexican Bitcoin exchange, you're kind of handling, let's say, that top percent of people who one, have savings and have enough savings that they can start really taking Bitcoin seriously.
Definitely. So, I mean, I think you touch on very good points there. I would start with a stat that really shook me when I came here. Maybe it's evolved a bit, but when I wrote a piece on this 3 years ago, it was only 3% of households in Mexico that had any sort of financial instrument at all, it means stocks, bonds, crypto, any form of financial instrument. You compare that to the US, where more than 50% of households have direct stock ownership. And I'm not talking about like pension plans, right? Like, yeah, half of Mexicans in the workspace have pension plans, and yeah, they have stocks through that, right? But I'm talking about direct ownership. So that is a stat that shook me, and it's like, okay, actually, not only the top of society actually owns um, uh, like stocks or bonds. So I would say, in our experience, we've mostly interacted
Yeah.
with people that are upper middle class and upper class, because those are the people that have the disposable income to invest. Those are the people that are thinking about that have the time to even think about the long term horizon of their finances. Most people are just working day to day, trying to survive. So and it's very understandable, right? So that has changed. Definitely, we're going under like a financialization of the country that is related but also unrelated to Bitcoin. There's like a fintech boom as well, a credit access boom. So I think we're also in a crucial moment in Mexico's history, and this applies to many countries in Latin America and in the third world, where financialization is finally happening. People are getting banking access, and this is very much happening through like crypto platforms. To be honest, like Bitso in Mexico has between 6 and 9 million users, which makes it the biggest fintech platform, or the biggest investment platform in the country. So um, just a crypto platform became the place where most people invest in. And now recently, let's say they've launched stocks, because they're like, well, we have more customers than the banks do for their stock products, so we'll just launch stocks too.
Interesting.
So that'll always.
I guess that is like they're kind of going the whole RWA style. Eventually, who knows? Maybe they're going to do that kind of thing. But yeah, it's interesting. I'm also curious to get like, oh, you've been in Mexico for a few years. I'm curious when you talk to people, just like everyday people, if they do save or invest. Like, is it typically like fixed deposit in the bank? Is it stocks? Is it trying to get property? Is it gold? Is it obviously a small percent in Bitcoin? Like, what is like a typical thing that people would do? Is it just like fixed deposits? Is that where their mind naturally goes?
Very good question. And once again, it depends who you're talking to, where they are at in society, you know. So fixed deposits are very interesting for people in Mexico because I believe I'm not exactly updated on the latest central bank rate, but I think it's around 8%. So if you're talking about central bank interest rate, it's 8%. Private lending starts at 12, you know, even goes to 20. So there's many there's products that will give you like a 20% rate, and it's not considered high risk. You know, so, and that's also a big question to ask ourselves as Bitcoiners is like, we're not in a country like here, when you present, let's say, 50% annual rate for Bitcoin, it's like, well, that doesn't seem that high for them, right? Because they're used to high inflation, to high interest rates. So I would say that's real estate and like bonds or just um, those type of notes in general. That's like a very common portfolio for most Mexicans, at least middle class and up. Then once you get to the higher thresholds of society, those are the people that actually own the operating companies in Mexico. So most of their wealth is attached to just operating companies, mostly in private markets. Mexico is only has about 10-15% of its like companies in the stock market compared to Brazil or Chile, which have more than 50. So very concentrated in private ownership, not publicly traded. And a lot of the wealthy also have, like it's estimated to have about half of their wealth outside of the country. And this probably has been a trend since Mexico had, you know, hyperinflation and like bank runs and even funds confiscations in the 80s and the 90s. So the wealthy are protected, but just keeping their assets in the U.S., in some other like tax optimized locations. But yeah. So this, and also if you talk about just the general Mexican population, a lot of cash holding just under the mattress, cash, or a lot of
Right, it's all cash in hand sort of stuff. Yeah.
informal schemes where like let's say 10 people will just loan each, like one of them is the custodian of their savings, you know, a lot of informal stuff to be honest.
Interesting. Yeah. And then, yeah, as you said, so if the central bank rate is like 8% and private lending starts at 12%, and just out of curiosity, I was looking up like, okay, what's like a typical debasement rate there for like Mexico M2, basically? What is the typical rate for that? And guess what? It's around 12% or 8 to 12%. So it's like a lot of these people think they're investing, but they're actually either losing pace or just, if they're lucky, they're kind of breaking even against actual fiat debasement. And I think that's part of our challenge as Bitcoiners is to obviously we have to go out there and try to educate people so they understand, well, you're still losing money, right? Like you actually need to hold Bitcoin so that you don't lose money, right?
Totally. I think I honestly that was a shocker too. I coming from Canada, I thought that Mexicans would be more aware of their recent history. You know, they had a hyperinflation crisis twice in the last 40 years. You'd think there's more awareness about that, maybe amongst older populations, but in general, not at all. People have no conscience of these terms. And I mean, most people are these are complicated things, right? Even to understand how a central bank and fiat currency works. But definitely a lot of work of education to do on that front, you know, and that's where we've been trying to do a lot. But the Mexican peso has also had a very strong past like 6 years. It's basically stable over like if you look at it, its exchange rate with the US dollar 6 years ago, it's basically at the same price. It has gone up and down since,
Oh,
but
interesting.
that
Okay.
has been a core part of this framework to understand is that the Mexican peso has actually always been unstable and is now recently stable. So that shifts people to like, actually currencies issues are not much of my concern, you know?
This episode is brought to you by CoinKite, the makers of my favorite Bitcoin hardware wallet, the Cold Card Q. Now, some people think self custody is too hard, but it's really about taking responsibility for your Bitcoin wealth and understanding that self custody gives you a true feeling of liberty. The Cold Card Q has a full keyboard and big screen. It's got two secure elements and a true air gap, allowing you to go fully air gapped using QR codes from seed generation to transaction signing. You can power the device using 3 AAA batteries, so you don't even have to plug it into the wall for power. You can easily use it with Sparrow Wallet for PC or Nunchuck on mobile, and you can dial it into the right level of security and complexity that you choose. If you want a simple setup, just use 12 words and single signature. If you want passphrases, easy. If you want to add multi-sig or co-signing features, you've got those too. So go to coinkite.com, use code Livera to get 10% off on your Cold Card or other devices and level up your self-custody today. Interesting. Yeah, so I guess maybe one way to think of that is just like the Mexican monetary authorities and government have just been relatively less, irresponsible compared to the past, because they've they're holding, at least the peso is holding roughly against the dollar. So I guess, yeah, I loosely speak, even though overall, yeah, there's a lot of inflation and everyone's getting debased, it's just relatively not as bad as it was before, I guess, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, give us a bit of an overview on Aureo. What's like the goal? As I understand, it's like a Bitcoin exchange. Are you targeting more for the high net worth, or are you just kind of for everyone, whoever? And give us a bit of an overview. What is the service offering there?
Definitely. So I would tell you Audio is a bit of a revival of the Verify platform we had in Mexico with in Canada, sorry, with a different approach. So our goal is to build a white glove personalized service platform in Mexico for investors and companies. We think that this country has been dominated for too long by crypto casinos, and it's time that like investors are offered an alternative that not only like provides them a technological platform where they can buy and sell and do other things, but also provides actually education and assistance for that process, right? I think Latinos, we often, most of our customers definitely come from the upper middle class and the middle class of this country, but we've also seen just other people join our platform, and it's open, and we want to provide like a premium experience to everyone. So we right now you can buy and sell Bitcoin on Audio. The sell is we used to be called Swapito, and our sell product like comes from those days. We're also licensed in El Salvador as a Bitcoin service provider, which allows us to do exchange and custody from El Salvador, and to offer those services in Mexico, as long as we also have the authorization to operate in Mexico, which we also do. So yeah, and the follow-up plans are to become a full-on Bitcoin platform, similar to platforms like River or OnRamp in the United States, where you can buy, sell, custody, even take a loan, DCA, things like that, right? I think we've had a lot of advancement in Europe and the United States for like a Bitcoin only vision, and this is now finally happening in other parts of the world. So I'm glad to be part of this journey.
Interesting. Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about the El Salvador regulation process, the license there, and actually why you pursued that? Because you could just, I mean, I'm curious, you could have just gone only for the Mexico license and not had to deal with that at all. Was there a reason for doing the El Salvador process as well?
Definitely. So Mexico doesn't have a Bitcoin license. It doesn't have any sort of regulations around crypto Bitcoin. It only has anti-money laundering or money laundering prevention law, and Bitcoin is considered like a risky like money laundering activity. So you have to register with the tax authorities and file monthly reports and share the data, right? That's what they care in the end. But it's not regulated as financial institutions are. Actually, the Central Bank of Mexico is extremely anti-Bitcoin, and since 2019 has banned financial institutions from issuing Bitcoin crypto products. So only you can only offer like Bitcoin services if you're either a non-regulated financial institution or if you're a foreign institution. So for us, it was like we have the choice between being a fully Mexican company where Bitcoin is in our books, but it's considered There's absolutely no regulations or even it's extremely unadvised to have Bitcoin in your books as a company in Mexico. So El Salvador was a great location, very affordable, very developed framework around this, also tax optimized, and it just makes sense for us in Mexico to do that. Let's say also Bitso, which is the biggest platform, they have their financial institution, their fintech in Mexico, but once you open an account with them, you're actually in a contract with their Gibraltar crypto exchange. And most companies, most crypto Bitcoin companies in Mexico, your counterpart will be a foreign entity. Um, so yeah, so that's the reason why we chose El Salvador, why we had to choose a foreign country for our exchange and custody center, and El Salvador was just at the right time, one of the best options in terms of accessibility, and it took us about 8 months, I would say, both process. It was not as expensive, more expensive than I thought originally, and more complicated. But definitely, we're talking way less than something like Mika in Europe, or a crypto platform, or what's coming in the US, right? So all combined together, definitely very accessible. I would recommend people to explore El Salvador as a jurisdiction for like a headquarters for an international operation.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah. Cool. And so when it comes to, I guess, the Mexican landscape, how does Aureo compare with, let's say, the crypto casinos? What are the main differences that you would see?
Well, I guess the first one is definitely the narrative and the message, right? The crypto casinos across the world, it's always about the next coin, the next meme coin, right? Or taking money from people that are developing coins to launch their coin. So it's always about scamming people, to be honest. And yeah, they provide a strong platform, and they also have like good products, and it's definitely a good product, but the narrative, the message is the main difference. I would also say that our platform is optimized for Bitcoiners. So, for example, our sell product, which was the Swapito product, it's optimized for people that live on the Bitcoin standard, that spend Bitcoin on a daily basis. So you don't have to, yeah, you could do the same thing on a crypto casino, but you would have to trade, like deposit Bitcoin, trade, withdraw, just 10, 20 steps that are, for us, it's just like 300 pesos, create order, pay from Lightning Wallet, boom, money arrives in the bank account within 10 seconds, right? And for the buy right now, it's not our final product, but we're also thinking in a similar way, right? Like enter a Bitcoin address, send pesos within 30 seconds, money's in your either on the mempool or in your Lightning wallet. So we optimize for Bitcoiner experience. We drive a Bitcoin only message, and we also want people to we also push a lot of educational content and community projects, such as being part of the community in Mexico City called La Casa de Satoshi, where we host monthly meetups in Mexico City, and a lot of other projects like that. So I would say that's the difference: the message, the focus on education and community, and the experience optimized for Bitcoiners.
Yeah, interesting. And I guess you being more closer to the technical side of things, you might be more interested to do some of the more, let's say, Bitcoin advanced technical things as well. Like in the future, maybe that means things like, Bolt 12 and BIP 353 and Lightning, stuff like that, and ways that like the payouts can be done in a way that's more, let's say, Bitcoiner techie savvy way, instead of where like this is something I notice in like the crypto casinos where they might maybe even if they offer Lightning, but it's just not done in a slick way, and the UX is like not that nice. And this is the tendency that I've noticed. Whereas like the Bitcoin Maxi type companies, they sort of focus more on that. So that could be interesting for people too.
Totally. That's definitely something we all things we want to do. However, you know how it is running a startup. It's all about prioritization. And I'm a realist in the end. I do I would recommend people like Bitcoiners to be more aware of what's happening in at least when you run a business, to be more aware of what's happening in the crypto world, and also to meet customers where they are. The reality or the technologies where they are. Right? It's like, yeah, I could launch Bolt 12 tomorrow, but nobody would be using it. So maybe I'll just wait until the market's there and the technology meet, so that the timing is right.
Yeah, also a fair position to take because you want as many you want a decent percentage of the users to actually be able to use it. But interesting. Let's talk a little bit about La Casa de Satoshi. So you've got this physical Bitcoin community space. As I understand, you've got like well, tell us a bit about that. Like, what are you offering there? What's going on there?
For sure. So I was very lucky that once I launched my startup in Mexico, I had some friends that were actually opening a Bitcoin physical space. So and it all happened around the same time, late 24. La Casa Satoshi is a physical space in Mexico City where we make events twice, at least twice a month. Generally, we have our Bitcoin bit devs at the end of the month where we cover more advanced topics. I'm the host of that meetup, but we also have more like networking and one-on-one presentations where the general public is invited to. It's also a co-working space during the day where I and my co-workers at Aureo, we work there every day, and the other Bitcoin startups like Kardashev, which is a mining Bitcoin project in Mexico, they also work there, right? So it's both. I would compare it to the space in Denver, or even Bitcoin Commons, you could say in Austin, where it's both a co-working space where projects get built, like it has the event space where that happen every month, but also like digital communities and digital presentations as well. So it what's really cool about this is also that there used to be a bar in Mexico City called the Bitcoin Embassy Bar, and it was open for about 5 years, but it shut down 1 month before La Casa Satoshi opened. So a lot of the community that was going to those events, participating in that community, they just shifted to La Casa Satoshi, and we kind of continued their mission. And Lorena, who was the founder of Bitcoin Embassy Bar, is also part of our community and a good friend of us. So I think we also came at the moment where other Bitcoin communities were launching across the country. So when I got to Mexico in 2021, I couldn't find one Bitcoin community in the whole country that was Bitcoin only, Bitcoin first. There were like crypto communities or inactive projects. And ever since we've launched in La Casa Satoshi in Mexico City, in Guadalajara, Chris Gita and Super Testnet, they lead a developer meetup. In Merida, they also have like a Merida community or multiple communities. So all communities are popping up around the country. I would say the Bitcoin only movement is finally happening in Mexico, and we're just very glad to be part of it.
Yeah, interesting to see how, like you sometimes you see, and it can really matter based on having the right person who just leads it. Like sometimes you just need someone who's just like got that energy about them, who just wants to like make it happen. And then when that person leaves that community or whatever, it sort of falls apart a little bit. So it kind of does require a few really talented or really passionate individuals who are really just going to keep going and keep meetups and events going. But that said, once you see that, and this is something I've noticed in other countries, that like once you sort of have you sort of plant one really good flag, and then other ones can sort of come up around that as well. But what has been your experience there on the kind of Mexican, let's say, Bitcoin only movement? Are you starting to see, like, okay, here's another example. What about like Mexican, Bitcoin, whatever, podcasters or influencers or whatever? Are you starting to see more of that, or not as much? Or like, what's your experience there?
Definitely starting to see more of that. I would tell you, and this is like by no means a disrespect to Mexicans, but I would tell you that a lot is driven by foreigners. I personally am a foreigner. The guys in Guadalajara too, and Merida too. A lot of them are foreigners. So, but also there, I would say it's half and half, right? Like half some meetups you'd go. We went to a meetup in Puerto Vallarta We had actually Paco de la India. Maybe you've heard of him.
Oh yeah, yeah, I know Paco.
He
Yeah,
Paco from India. He was run with Bitcoin, and he came to Mexico, and we did a tour with. He actually stayed on my house, and we did a tour of like 5 cities. We did meetups all over the country, and like say in Puerto Vallarta, it was only Canadians. No Mexicans came to that meetup. But when we went and like 35-year-old Canadians, when we went to San Miguel, de Allende, which is like a retiree city, it was only like 65 and plus Americans. But then when we did a meetup in Mexico City, it's like, oh no, here it's actually mostly Mexicans, and another city too, right? So definitely a lot of a big shift has happened over the past few years. We have way more people that are creating content, that are launching companies. Now there's about four Bitcoin only companies in Mexico, or maybe even five. And every year there's new ones being added. So I'm optimistic. However, I would add that the people in Mexico are not there yet. It's not like there's been a platform that has figured out how to acquire hundreds of thousands of users or millions of users like Swan or River or Strike did in the United States, So that's what we want to do. We really want to iterate until we find the formula that actually gets Mexicans interested in this vision. That I think we haven't resolved for it yet, but many of us across the country are working on different projects to arrive there.
interesting. Yeah, and it's a good point you raised about expats contrasted with locals as well, because yeah, maybe it is. Maybe some of your customers will actually be expats who live in Mexico, but maybe they are not actually Mexicans. So that could also be an interesting thing where you end up selling to a lot of expats, at least at the start of your journey, and then maybe over time you kind of crack the code on reaching the locals.
That has been a lot the case. And in Suapiro, our first over the past year, we have acquired many expats as customers, many already existing Bitcoiners in Mexico. We haven't yet cracked the code on how to convert like no coiners to become Bitcoiners, or even like crypto people to become Bitcoiners, which I think will happen with time. But definitely a lot of expat, like the big expat market here, definitely taking place.
Interesting. Yeah. Now I know you guys did a raise with early riders. So tell us a little bit about that. And I know I did an episode a little while back with Michael from OnRamp, and we're talking a little bit about that. And what I found interesting with early riders is it's like they're trying to be Bitcoin denominator, or Bitcoin is the hurdle rate, right? So can you talk a little bit about that, raising with early riders and this Bitcoin hurdle rate idea?
Definitely. So, I mean, I met Michael probably 5 years ago when he was working on Unchain, and I was at Verify. So I mean, we didn't keep touch, but once I got through an introduction, I started talking with these guys. Was like, I remember you, Gustavo, from those days. So I guess that helped a bit. I think the hurdle rate vision is very important, because not only we're like Bitcoin has shifted how investment works, but I also think AI has shifted how productive we are, right? And it's like if you can if you don't have a team that's like maximizing its productivity, chances are you will never be able to outperform Bitcoin. So for us, it's very important that we stay lean, that everyone in our team maximizes its productivity with technology and particularly AI, which I think is strongly powerful. So and I think that would be my addition to the Bitcoin as a hurdle rate. It's like invest in startups that know how to maximize their productivity to be actually able to outperform Bitcoin. So I think I do agree with other thesis that the shift, maybe we're still in a fiat era for a couple of years, so most people won't behave this way, but I think it's wise to prepare for the Bitcoin era, and where this is going to work this way. So they invested 10 Bitcoin on our company. We hope we're pretty sure we'll be able to outperform that. Their multi-institution custody vision also impacted how we see access to Bitcoin custody. it's and particularly related to Latin America. So I would tell you that a lot of the concern has been for Mexicans to like, why would I buy Bitcoin if I might lose it, if it might get stolen from me? How can I even make sure it's secure? So I like the multi-institution custody balance that it doesn't have a single point of failure. It even became recommended in like a Bitcoin Policy Institute uh, report they did where they recommend state treasuries to adopt this partition custody strategy. So we want to integrate with the on-ramp API once it's fully settled and stabilized. We want to integrate it directly on the platform so our customers can buy Bitcoin and then hold it through these secure systems and directly on our platform, right? So it came a lot. The on-ramp relationship was a lot of the early the early writers relationship, sorry, was a lot of not only we kind of have share a similar product vision, but also just a general investment thesis vision. Plus, we're kind of becoming friends too. So it all made sense in the end. And I think they were also looking to expand their horizon beyond the United States. They have like on ramp Mina as a portfolio company in early writers focused in the Middle East. So I think we're gonna be their LATAM play in some ways.
Interesting, yeah. And then, yeah, as you mentioned, you're kind of touching on the on-ramp multi-institution custody thing. So, I mean, I've had an episode with Michael for listeners who are interested in kind of a deeper exploration there. But it seems to be a common, maybe it's like a baby step for a lot of people who are obviously, maybe they're not ready for the full self-custody journey. And, I can understand where maybe like a high net worth person maybe might be more comfortable with that because they want some of the other things that can kind of come alongside this aspect of it, because they want like a pro level custodian, but they want maybe inheritance or some other aspect of it to be kind of handled or at least assisted through that process. But yeah, okay. So I think those are kind of the key points that I was keen to discuss with you. Anything else that you think we didn't mention, or any closing thoughts on Bitcoin in Mexico?
Definitely. So I mean, I think people should come to Mexico if you're interested in this experience. Like Casa de Satoshi, I think everybody would be impressed of the quality and the community we're building in Mexico City. There's also a conference in Merida, which is in the southern part of Mexico, close to Cancun, in December, in about a month, Mayan Bitcoin Conference. We're going to be there. I also think that will be like a good point of reunion for all communities across the country. And I would tell people to be more open-minded about how Bitcoin will be adopted across the world. It will definitely not be the same way it has been adopted in the United States, right? Because cultures work differently, society or even socioeconomic systems are made differently. So that's that has been a big lesson for me, right? So I talk about it from a humble point of view where I was humbled by that experience, and I would advise people to be open about that. But yeah, if we please follow us to stay updated on everything we do. We have a lot of stuff coming up over the next few months. And thank you, Stephan, for having me on your podcast.
Yeah, of course. And what's the website for Aureo, just for people who are listening?
AureoBitcoin.com.
Excellent. Okay, well, yeah, links in the show notes. And yeah, thanks for joining me. And yeah, good luck with it, Gustavo. Thank you, and I'll see you around.
Thank you.